Hey everybody, this is Eve West. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to talking about certain metaphysical topics. It's dedicated to talking about the occult and various I would say topics within the metaphysical community that I feel need to be addressed, because there's a lot of things out there, that a lot of misconceptions about the metaphysics and spirituality. And it's gotten to a point where I feel totally kind of unnerved by it. And so this channel is a way for me, it's kind of like a therapy for me to kind of get out a lot of the the misconceptions that I see out there involving the metaphysics. And it's also dedicated to a few. I don't expect to get a whole lot of likes out of my videos, to be honest with you, because a lot of the information that I share has to be experienced. It's not something that's going to resonate with a lot of people, because I don't know, it's kind of like once you reach a certain stage of consciousness, you have to experience it. There, you can't conceptualize it, or in other words, quantify it. You can't quantify the information. And so since you can't quantify it, you're going to have a certain understanding or prerequisites, a bridge, if you will, to where I'm going or where I'm taking you. And so if you don't have that bridge of knowledge, then you're going to be lost. And so that's fine, because we're all at different stages of consciousness. If I were looking at my videos 15 years ago, 10-15 years ago, I would have been like, okay, what the hell is she talking about, honestly? So I'm not like throwing off on anyone or saying, oh, you know what, if you don't understand what I'm saying, then you're stupid, or you're not a part of the chosen, or you're not a part of the initiate, or whatever the case is. That's not so. It's just that some people are at different levels, and in the matrix there's some people who are at the base level. You're about all about the material. You're about what's going on television, looking at the news, looking at Love and Hip Hop, and all these shows on television. You're about going to the club, shopping, and going to church and stuff like that. So these are different facets of the matrix that that many people are in, and that is your stage of development spiritually. And so I do see the value in not just the super spiritual aspect of us being a human being, but also I see the value in terms of us being earthly as well. So both of them matter. But if you're super earthly, that actually hurts you. And you're super spiritual, like I am, that also hurts you as well. So it's important to be grounded. And so I'm going to focus on a number of different topics, like, for example, one big thing in the New Age is Christ and Christ consciousness and what that really means. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about Christ and Christ consciousness. And I correlate this a lot to Christianity and the crucifixion of Jesus and so forth. And so people tend to think Christ is a really great thing. However, I put a very dark spin on what that actually means. Okay. I'm going to be talking about COVID-19. Of course, COVID-19 is a big reality for us now, right? With the quarantine and so forth. And so especially as human beings, not everyone in the matrix is human, but for human beings, for people who have feelings, the quarantine is definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue. And I talk about how COVID-19 correlates to the restrictions brought upon us by COVID-19 is related to restricting the soul, restricting the solar plexus. Okay, so I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on other various topics as well, such as meditation. Meditation is a big thing in the New Age, but I'm going to talk to you a lot about the dark side of meditation, because they talk it up as being something so wonderful and so great. But meditation actually brings you closer to death, and death of your ego. And so the New Age is all about killing the ego, but the ego represents Jesus in lots of ways. And so this is a way for Rome, if you will, which is represented by the Matrix, how Rome is actually dedicated to killing Jesus, which is the soul or your solar plexus or Son of God. So I talk about the metaphysical aspects of what Jesus is about. Okay. Also, I'm going to focus a lot on astrology and chakras. Okay. If you don't have any prerequisites for that, you may have heard of it though. Chakras are energy systems within the body, and so these energy systems are they correspond to planets or planned nets of consciousness. And so, when it comes to being incarnating and being born into a body, astrology plays a part because it's the study of the planets. And so these are your energies that you're born with. Every time, when you're born, when someone is born, like when my daughter was born, the first thing, the very, very, very first thing that they did was they called the time of her birth. That's the first thing. This is the time that she's born. So your time of birth means a lot. So that kind of correlates to the fact that astrology is very important to who you are as a soul. It talks about your energies that you were born with, and also how those energies kind of twist and shift throughout your incarnation until your death. Okay, so we're going to focus on astrology and, how to read a natal chart and, that type of thing. And that might be pretty, interesting and cool for some people. I know for me, it was very cool. Now it's a little bit more serious, and as I'm getting into the more I would say, the logistics of astrology is going beyond interest now to, okay, this is something that needs to be studied so I can kind of, get a grasp of my energies, especially being such a polarized, super spiritual soul. We're going to talk about the matrix, itself and the different facets of the matrix, talk about sex and race. We're going to talk about money, and how, these various taboo topics that we're forced and shunned for talking about, how they're very significant to us in an earthly sense, and how those aspects of us are perverted in the matrix to keep us coming back and reincarnating. I'm going to talk a lot about, in terms of chakras, right? Because I mentioned that when I talked a little bit about astrology. But your chakras, the chakra that I want to focus a lot on is your solar plexus and your root chakra. So if you've heard about the Whore of Babylon actually corresponds to the perversion of the solar plexus and the root chakra, which are your sexual chakras, if you will. So if you're in a body, you're under a restriction. And so when you're under a restriction, it perverts the sexual nature, and so it makes you a whore, basically, because you exist in two different realms. You're not just an ego, a physical ego, but when you go to sleep at night, you leave your body and you go to your astral self, and this is the self that is unconscious, that you're not aware of. And so if you've been reincarnated so many times, like I have, there's a severe imbalance between your ego and your astral self. So like for me, my astral self is very, angelic. You know what I mean? My astral self is very much, kind and nurturing and that type of thing. And the people are like, oh, well, how are you talking about yourself like that? That you're kind and nurturing. I don't have very much ego left. So most egos won't talk about themselves like that. But I look at myself in a very objective way, unlike some people. So it's easy to fall victim to the ego. In this life I could be loving, kind, and nurturing, and then in the next life I could be a horrible bitch, so don't get too wedded to your ego in terms of, oh, I'm so wonderful or I'm so hateful. The ego is just a false you, if you will, for good or bad. So you can play the angel of the checkerboard floor, the white part, or you can play the demon, which is the black part of the checkerboard floor of Freemasonry. They both actually go hand in hand, and one is really not better than the other when you look at the occult aspects of spirituality. Okay, I'm going to talk about Black Lives Matter, okay, and talk about the significance of melanin and how that correlates to Jesus. Okay, and many people have heard, Jesus is black and so forth. So I'm going to actually, tie in the occult significance of what that really means, and talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, which really was, spearheaded by, people that actually, hate black people. You know, Black Lives Matter was created by people who hate black people. And so people are like, oh, wow, that's ironic. But it's true. And so I'm going to actually talk about that movement, talk about the elite that, you know, created this matrix structure and how they're very sick. They're very sick. And so they have actually facilitated an environment of chaos, or they're trying to facilitate an environment of chaos to feed their life force because they're so bored. You know, they've, you know, fucked and eaten and shopped, and, you know, they've done everything at the physical level that they can do 33 times over. And so it's getting to the point where they have to make people suffer to gain an emotional charge so they feel better about themselves. And they do this in the dark because it's hard for them to look at themselves. You know, they would rather throw stones and hide their hands than to really fess up to what they've really become and how they've really devolved. And they blame other people for their demise, but they are the reason why they're so screwed up. And you know, we'll talk about different aspects of the elite, and, you know, the, like, for example, the one of the things that came up recently was the thing with Jada Pinkett and Will Smith, and Jada's infidelity and so forth. And so the elite, they do a lot of things in the dark, and, you know, they don't want it to be known. And so when it comes to the light, they have to lie in order to make themselves look better, if you will. So, you know, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk a lot about brainwave frequencies, and this is the nerdy side of me, right? I've been trying to get less nerdy and embrace, you know, my more earthly side, embrace my sexuality, embrace, you know, being grounded and doing things that are very grounding, you know, in the matrix, kind of mundane, like a lot of most egos do, right? But I'm super spiritual, and so I definitely look at the use of brainwave frequencies and how these frequencies are used to program our subconscious mind, okay? And so when the subconscious is programmed, it keeps you coming back and reincarnating into hell. Okay, so, you know, you might want to take some notes, whatever, when I get to that particular part, you know, of that particular video, or what have you. But you know, brainwave frequencies are very important. They're key, actually, to a lot of different you know, things I talk about in different aspects of the matrix. And so I want to talk about how desire is the major part that keeps the matrix going, and that if you don't ground desire through your physical ego, right? Because most of us don't have the time or money, which is Saturn or Satan at this point. We don't have the time or money to ground our desires. And so when you can't ground your desires, then you can't escape the matrix. Your body, as a soul, you'll always be longing for that part of yourself that has dominion over the material. And so, you know, we're material beings just like we're spiritual beings. And so we always want to have the other part of ourselves, to feel whole, to feel holy. And that kind of gets into this whole idea about the Pope. And so I will be talking about the Pope and how, and what his relationship to Jesus is. And I'll be talking about that, and how Jesus is coming back for the Pope. And so, you know, I'll talk about Lucifer and what that means, and, you know, how Lucifer just means, if you look at the prefix Luce, it just means light or light bearer. And so the matrix in this earthly world now, which has devolved into hell, is really, you know, a dark place. And so whenever Lucifer or Lucy actually, you know, steps on the scene, then people try to put out that light. So a lot of times, you know, in metaphysical circles and religion, or I wouldn't say metaphysical circles, but in religion, Lucifer or Lucy is seen as a bad figure. And Lucifer is seen as a bad figure because Lucifer has knowledge. And so to exist as an ego, you know, an ego is based upon a lie. And so Lucifer actually comes to expose the ego, and, well, not necessarily expose the ego, but to expose the system that created the ego. So to really set the ego free. And so Rome and the Pope and, you know, the hierarchy, whatever, that's connected to the elite are have designed a system to actually destroy knowledge, so they don't have to come to judgment about what they have done to Jesus. And so Jesus is actually, here to expose the system and to destroy the system itself, to take it over, and to to restore wholeness and innocence to something that they have destroyed and desecrated, which is the soul, the solar plexus. I think for the most part, that's what I wanted to talk about, want to share with you guys in this video. Just various topics that I'm going to be exploring in the future. And, guys, I look forward to, dialoguing with you. And, you guys can comment below to, ask questions and things like that. I definitely, I'm open to, doing, subsequent videos to address topics that I didn't, different things I hadn't addressed before, or if you have questions and things like that, I definitely want to, create some type of dialogue or what have you, so, people don't feel afraid to talk about certain things or what have you. So many, along my evolution, I've been so afraid to talk to people about certain things. Or I haven't been able to have people engage with me about certain things because they're afraid. It's fear. But I've heard somewhere that fear is the opposite of love. And so as a result, I feel that, we have to have courage to, look into these topics without fear and to not just dismiss them. Because a lot of topics I'm going to talk about with you are frightening to the ego. They're absolutely frightening to the ego. It exposes your ego. It's stuff that is like, I didn't really want to learn that today. You know what I mean? Because that destroys me. That doesn't make me so significant or what have you. And the ego wants to be significant. The ego wants to be, wants to exist. And I think, of course, the ego should. That's balance. But there's also this other side to the ego as well, where the ego should be able to exist within truth and not feel under attack, if you will. Okay, so thanks guys for listening, and I look forward to dialoguing with you guys in the future. All right, thanks.